Some minds do not fall asleep by being told to stop. They need something quiet enough to follow. At 3 a.m., the room seems to have changed. It has not. The ceiling is the same distance from the bed it was 3 hours ago. The same plaster, the same faint seam, where two sections met during construction, and the line has slowly widened over the building's years of expansion and contraction. The walls are where they were. The window is where it was. The curtain holds the fold it has held all night, weighted at the hem, the lower edge resting against the sill, the upper edge admitting a narrow gap through which a thin line of illumination enters from the street below. The objects in the room have not moved. The glass of water on the surface beside the bed is where it was placed before sleep. The door is at the same angle it was before sleep. The shelf holds what the last waking hour left on it. The dimensions of the room are the same dimensions they were when sleep arrived. Nothing has been added. Nothing has been removed. The room is identical to the room that was here at midnight. What has changed is not in the room. The body has been losing heat since sleep onset. The internal temperature follows a cycle it runs every night, with or without awareness, with or without sleep, rising through the afternoon into the early evening, falling as the night deepens, reaching its lowest value in the hours before the first light of morning. At this hour, the body is at or near that lowest point, a fraction of a degree cooler than at midnight, a fraction of a degree cooler than when sleep first arrived. The number is not large. It is present in the tissue, in the metabolic rate, in the rate at which the heart contracts and the lungs exchange gas, present throughout the whole body, running as a fact of where the nightly cycle currently sits. This position in the cycle changes what the body can receive from the room. The bedding holds the record of the night's movement. In the regions where the body has rested through the hours since sleep, the long line where the back has been, the curve where the knees drew up at some point in the night, the area where the feet have spent most of the hours. The fabric holds warmth, not warmth from now. Warmth placed there across the night, the body releasing heat at the rate the gradient between skin and fabric allowed, the material absorbing what it received and holding it. In the regions the body has not occupied, the far side of the mattress, the section of pillow that has not been under the head, the temperature is closer to the room's ambient air. The distribution of warmth in the bedding is the record of where the body has been. At the boundary between the skin and the air, exchange continues. Where the body is covered, the exchange is slow. The fabric has reached near skin temperature. The gradient between skin and bedding is small. Very little passes in either direction. Where the face is uncovered, the exchange runs faster. The air immediately over the face receives what the skin surface there releases. This air, slightly warmed by the exchange, rises by convection and is replaced by cooler air from the room, and the exchange begins again. The skin of the face is in continuous contact with the room's air, losing to it at the rate the current difference between the body's surface temperature and the room temperature allows. The face is slightly cooler at this hour than it was at sleep onset, not uncomfortably. The body's surface temperature and the room's air temperature are not far apart at this hour. The room has been holding the warmth that the body has released all night, and the body is near its nadir of production, and the two conditions have approached each other across the hours of darkness. But the exchange is still running, still net in one direction. The air near the bed holds what the body has given it, slightly warmer than the air at the far end of the room, slightly heavier with the moisture that the skin and the breathing have released. On the surface beside the bed, the glass of water has reached the temperature of the room. It was set down warmer than the air, not by much, but by the amount that tap water sits above the ambient when it is first poured. Since then, heat has moved from the water through the glass walls of the container and into the surrounding air, and the water's temperature has fallen toward the air temperature of the room. It has now been there long enough that the exchange is nearly complete. The water is the temperature of the room. At the surface of the water, exchange continues in both directions. Molecules leave the water surface and enter the air above it as vapor, at the rate the temperature and the dryness of that small column of air permit. Molecules from the air occasionally arrive at the water surface and join the liquid. The two rates are nearly balanced at this hour. The air in the vicinity of the glass is slightly more humid than the rest of the room, from the outward exchange running across the night. The meniscus holds its curve at the glass wall, the surface tension unchanged, the shape determined by the same forces it was determined by when the glass was first filled. The glass of water is doing what glass-held water does. The room contains sounds. They were there at midnight. The refrigerator in the adjacent space runs on a cycle, the compressor engaging when the interior temperature rises above its threshold, running until the temperature falls, disengaging, the interior rising again until the compressor is needed once more. The compressor produces vibration at low frequencies, below the range where the ear is most sensitive, and this vibration travels through the machine's housing into the floor and into the wall separating the rooms, and arrives here as a slight change in the pressure of the air. Not a sound in the sense of something with a distinct onset and a name. A quality of the air, a texture to the atmosphere of the room that is different when the compressor is running from when it is not. This vibration was present at midnight. The pipes in the walls have been cooling since the last use of hot water. The water that remains in them has been giving up its heat to the pipe walls, and the walls have been giving their heat to the surrounding building material, and the material is releasing what the day left in it. Thermal contraction moves through the pipe material as it cools, not uniformly, not all at once, but zone by zone as the temperature gradient advances through the metal. When the contraction in a section of pipe creates sufficient stress against the fitting that holds it, the fitting yields by a fraction, and the yield is brief and specific. A small sound, not immediately repeated, different each time in pitch and duration, because the exact geometry of the contact changes with each adjustment. This was happening at midnight. Beyond the window, the street carries what a street at this hour carries, reduced but not absent. A vehicle at distance, its engine sound arriving through the glass at the frequencies the glass transmits, entering the room. If there are trees between the window and the street, the occasional movement of a leaf in air that is mostly still. The ambient sound of a city at 3 a.m. is not silence. It is a specific level of sound, lower than what the day provides, present at this level every night at this hour, consistent enough that it registered as background at midnight and was not attended to. At midnight, the compressor vibration was below the line. The pipe adjustment was below the line. The vehicle passing outside was below the line. What has changed at this hour is not the sounds. What has changed is the position of the line. During sleep, the threshold at which a sound produces a response in the system shifts outward. Not stopping, the structures that convert sound into neural signal continue working. The pathway toward the brain continues carrying what they produce. But the threshold at which arriving signal becomes a change in the system state moves further from the signal strength. Familiar sounds fall below the line. The refrigerator, which at waking levels would sit very close to the boundary of audibility, falls well below it. The pipe's small adjustment, which at waking levels would be a small but distinct event, falls below it. At this hour, the system has moved closer to wakefulness, not into wakefulness, not into the state where language begins, where the day's concerns present themselves in sequence, but closer. The threshold has moved inward, toward what the room is offering. The refrigerator vibration, at the same frequency and amplitude it held at midnight, now sits at a level that crosses the line. The pipe makes its small adjustment, and the sound arrives. The vehicle outside is a vehicle, briefly, before the room resumes. The room is not louder. The room is producing the same sounds it was producing at midnight. The threshold has moved toward them. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. Against the curtain, a narrow band of light enters at the upper edge. The source is outside and below the window's framing. A streetlight, the ambient illumination of this hour, arriving at the window glass at a shallow angle and passing through the gap in the curtain in the small quantity the gap's geometry allows. A few photons per second, or several hundred. The number measurable, small by any daylight scale. The gap has not changed since the curtain was drawn. The source has not changed. The angle of arrival has shifted slightly as the hours have advanced and the planet has turned, but the change in the number of photons crossing the gap between midnight and this hour is not significant. This light was entering the room at midnight. The wall it falls on was receiving it then. The ceiling near the curtain was lit to the same degree by it then. At midnight, the room felt dark. At this hour, the line on the wall is visible. The ceiling above the curtain gap is not quite dark. The eye has been in darkness for the duration of sleep. In the absence of light, the photosensitive layer of the retina restores what light had depleted. The compound at the center of low light vision. The pigment that photons break down. The breakdown being the event that initiates the signal sent toward the brain, is rebuilt. molecule by molecule in darkness. In sustained darkness, the concentration of this compound climbs back toward its maximum. After 20 minutes of darkness, the eye's sensitivity to light is substantially greater than it was in ordinary room illumination. After an hour, greater still. After several hours, the hours of sleep, the eye has reached or closely approached the maximum sensitivity its cellular structure allows. At this level of dark adaptation, the eye requires almost nothing to register. A handful of photons, a level of illumination that in daylight would not move the signal at all. The narrow band of light entering through the curtain gap, the same light that was there at midnight, carrying the same number of photons, falling on the same wall, is, at this hour, above the threshold the dark adapted eye requires to register it. At midnight, it was below that threshold. The room was offering the same illumination it is offering now. The eye required more than the room was providing. At this hour, the eye requires almost nothing from the room, and the room is providing enough. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. The room did not become more awake. The threshold had moved closer to the surface. What the refrigerator's vibration requires to be heard, what the narrow band of light through the curtain requires to register, what the pipe's small adjustment requires to become a sound. These are positions on a continuum, and the body's location in its nightly cycle determines where on that continuum the thresholds currently sit. As the body moves from the deepest hours of sleep toward the pre-dawn chemistry of approach, the thresholds move with it, not suddenly. Gradually, along the curve the cycle traces, the receiving end of each channel moving toward what the room has been offering all night. The room has been offering the same things all night. The threshold arrived at a different position. Hours before the intended waking time, the body begins a preparation it does not announce. A compound released by the adrenal glands increases slowly in concentration in the blood. The increase is not a spike. It is a gradual rise, building through the pre-dawn hours toward the levels that accompany the first moments of the waking day. The schedule for this rise was not set tonight. It was established across many nights, from the accumulated record of when light began, when demands arrived, when the chemistry of waking was needed. The body has encoded this record into the timing of its chemistry. The compound is rising now because the timing says this is when it rises. Hours before any alarm, hours before any exterior signal calls for waking. The heart rate, which reached its minimum in the deepest hours of sleep, has begun to return. Not dramatically, a few beats per minute above the lowest value the night produced. The cardiac muscle has slightly more tone. The blood is moving at a slightly higher rate through the circuit of the body. The vessels in the extremities, which in the deep hours reduced their flow to the minimum the tissue requires, are receiving slightly more. The hands are slightly warmer than they were at the nadir. The feet are slightly warmer. The breathing has shifted upward from the rate the deepest sleep held. Still well below waking. Still the slow exchange of a body in which the most demanding processing has not yet resumed. but the rate has moved. The depth of each breath has changed. The balance between the drive to breathe and the rate at which the blood chemistry calls for it has shifted, moved by the rising compound, by the returning heart rate, by the body's slow movement toward the conditions from which waking will come. The body is not awake. The body is in the pre-dawn chemistry of approach. It is moving toward waking from the inside at its own rate, following the schedule it assembled without asking. The ceiling receives all of this. The plaster holds its temperature at the rate plaster holds temperature in a room at this hour. The narrow line of light from the curtain's gap travels across the room, reaches the ceiling at the angle the room's geometry produces, and arrives. The ceiling does not know that the threshold below it has moved, that the same refrigerator vibration that was below the line at midnight is now just above it, that the photons from the gap in the curtain are now registering where they were not registering 3 hours ago. The ceiling reflects sound at the angles the surface determines. It holds heat at the rate plaster holds heat. The room continues. The glass of water beside the bed holds the temperature of the room. The exchange at its surface is still running. Molecules leaving the water for the air, molecules arriving from the air into the water, the two rates nearly matched, the net movement very slow. The meniscus holds its curve at the glass wall. The water that was poured last night is the water that is here now, minus the fraction the surface has released across the hours of darkness, plus the fraction the room's air has returned. The return is not the same water. The exchange continues. The compound in the blood continues its slow rise toward the concentration the waking hour requires. The dark adapted eye continues to receive the room's minimal light at a threshold that costs it almost nothing. The sounds that sat below the register at midnight are above it now, arriving as the threshold that separates them from the register continues its inward movement toward what the room has been offering all night, toward the hour the body has already decided is next. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. When night falls, the archive remains,